Is this as good as it gets? Yes, it is. Thanks for watching. Clear skies. Some time ago, and it really has been some time because, let's face it, we haven't had clear skies in what seems like forever in my neck of the suburbs. I decided to once and for all tweak my back focus. So I saw these images online. I believe that these images were on the old OPT website, and they showed what you would see in your field of view if your back focus was too close or too far away. Now, these images were uncomfortably close to what I was seeing in my field of view. In fact, based on the patterns, they made me think that my back focus was way too far away and that I had to bring it closer. So I bought some extension rings and began to play with my back focus. As a baseline, I went outside when I had a partially clear night and I imaged NGC884 and NGC869. Now these are a pair of open clusters, which between the two of them fill your entire field of view with stars. And the resulting image was shockingly bad. Not only were my stars unbelievably stretched around the corners, but there was a ring of stars that were stretched in a circular pattern around my entire image. So this got me to thinking, can I finally fix my back focus? And can I settle once and for all what the quality of the field of view is for a Celestron NexStar 6SE telescope? Will this be the experiment that dashes my hopes and dreams for astro imaging with this telescope? Or will we be able to find the sweet spot where the back focus actually works? Join me and a fistful of extension rings as we go to find out. This is the image that I started with. Now this image was taken at 105 millimeters of back focus, which is the recommended back focus by ZWO for this camera, the ASI294MC Pro, and this telescope. You can see from this image that there's a lot of distortion. First of all, the stars around the edges are stretched in a circular fashion, which according to the OPT back focus spacing guide means that my camera sensor is too far away. Now I reduced my back focus by taking out the ASI supplied 21mm extension ring with something shorter. In fact, I went from 21 to 17 and then 18 millimeters. And the results were just as bad. And since the weather wasn't cooperating, I decided to take the whole experiment inside and take the same approach that I took last year when I was collimating my telescope, namely pointing my scope at a field of fake stars on my laptop. Now for the first go around, I used the same fake field of stars as I used last year. I set my scope to be about 25 feet away, and then I added and removed extension rings and looked at the difference by focusing using a Bahtinov mask. Now this first set of experiments led me to think that my back focus was in fact too short, and that 105 millimeters was also too short. So I added to that distance and took my scope out to test again. Now, a good clear night is hard to come by these days, but I did settle for one that was slightly windy and cloudy, but gave me enough clear sky to image something that I could compare. And unfortunately, the results were pretty bad. So at this point, I was starting to get a little disillusioned. Setting the back focus to 105 millimeters wasn't working. Bringing it closer did not help. Bringing it farther out did not help. I was really starting to think that I just never paid enough attention to how badly the stars were distorted with this telescope. And I also knew that now that I had seen the distortions, I wouldn't be able to unsee them. So I have to admit, I was at a little bit of a loss of what to do next. One thing I did know was that we did not have enough clear skies, and adding and removing individual rings in the dark with the telescope mounted on my pier wasn't going to solve this. So I decided to take a systematic approach. I got some more extension rings, I set up my scope with a fake field of stars, this time one that was much more suitable for this type of back focus experiment, and I set aside a whole Saturday to figure this out. From a practical standpoint, if you want to connect your first camera, your DSLR, to your telescope, you need a few things. You need your visual back, which connects to the back of the telescope. You need a T-adapter, which as I understand it, stands in for the distance that you would get through your diagonal. And you need a T-ring. Now your T-ring is there to give the proper spacing between the end of the T-adapter and the flange of your camera, given the distance between the flange of the camera and your actual sensor inside the camera. So all of these components together give you the proper spacing that you need to connect a DSLR. Now what happens when you get a CMOS camera? Well, according to the latest instructions from ASI, I should be able to connect this nosing directly to this camera, to the 11mm spacer that's already there, and I should be able to slide this right into the back of my telescope, which is what I did for planetary this year. However, I don't think that's correct. And the reason I don't think it's correct is because by sliding this directly into my visual back, like this, I'm actually missing the spacing that the T-adapter would have given me. So I think the proper back focus for this camera, not using a field flattener, needs to include this T-adapter. Now the reason this makes sense to me is because this T-adapter allows me to substitute this T-adapter for other components, such as this filter tray. If I didn't have the T-adapter here, and the assumption would be that the camera connects directly to the visual back, there wouldn't be any room in there for a filter tray. This is the Celestron f6.3 field flattener and focal reducer. What it's supposed to do is to flatten out the lensing at the edges of the field of view and to reduce the focal length of the telescope, stopping it down from an f10 to an f6.3. Effectively changing the focal length of the scope from 1500 millimeters down to just under 1000. Now using this focal reducer changes the back focus distance requirements for the focal reducer in the camera. And the reason for this is because the focal reducer changes where the telescope focuses from just about here to just about here. Now this isn't exact measurements, but you get the idea. The focal distance increases. And to make up for that difference, we have to add in some additional spacing. Now to do that, Celestron sells this additional T-adapter. Now the difference between this T-adapter and this T-adapter here that we've been using with the DSLR is that this one's actually longer. Now this T-adapter would work directly with this T-ring for my Nikon camera, connecting directly to this focal reducer. In essence, this plus the distance between the outer flange of the camera and the sensor would give me the proper back focus for a DSLR. Now, to achieve the same thing with this camera, I would have to add some additional components to allow for the spacing that happens between the flange and the camera sensor. Now, according to documentation, the back focus distance between the end of this focal reducer and the sensor inside the camera, which sits behind this 11mm spacer behind the glass and is further reduced into the camera by 6.5 millimeters, is a total of 105 millimeters. And to achieve that, we would need this 50mm T adapter, followed by a 16.5mm spacer, which comes with the camera. Now this is my filter tray, which is also 16.5mm, followed by a 21mm additional ring, which also comes with the camera. Now, this back focus distance changes if you're using a filter tray with a filter. And that has to do with the fact that the lens inside the filter changes the diffraction of light, making the focal distance actually a little bit further away, meaning we have to increase the back focus by less than a millimeter in order to get it just right. But what does that look like in practice? Now, behind me is my laptop. This laptop is showing a makeshift simulation of stars, basically single pixels across a black background. I'm going to be focusing from my telescope from across the other end of the room onto this background as if I was looking at a field of stars. Now granted, the focus is not going to be close to infinity as it would be if we were outside with the night sky. This is not going to be an exact simulation. But I'm hoping that for the purposes of figuring out back focus, meaning that we're going to try to get as flat a field of view as we possibly can, this should do the trick. So what exactly am I doing? So first of all, I'm going to connect this camera to the back of my telescope using just the visual back and the nosing that came with the camera as per the latest instructions of the ASI manual. Then I'm going to attach this T-adapter with the nosing to my camera. And that's going to be our baseline. And from there, I'm going to connect the focal reducer with the 50mm T-adapter and the proper 16.5 plus 21 millimeters of spacing recommended by both Celestron and ASI in order to get the proper back focus with the camera. And from there, I'm going to add and remove spacers to see what that does to the stars around the edges. So now for the filter. For the filter, I'm going to take the 105 millimeters that are recommended. I'm going to increase with this 1 millimeter spacer. So here's my 21 millimeter and the adapter ring. And then from here, let's add a filter. Now this is going to be my IR cut filter, which is easy to see through, so it's not going to impact what I can see through the scope. So today we're going to look at lensing with and without a focal reducer, and then setting the back focus with and without the focal reducer. First trial, I'm connecting my camera directly to the nosing without the focal reducer. So at this point, the back focus spacing is set to pretty much nothing. This is good. Here's my field of view. I can see that there is some distortion around the edges. I'm not in focus yet, I'm out of focus, but this is what I would expect to see when I was doing my collimation. So in order to check my collimation, I could see whether or not the stretching around the edges is uniform. And in this case, it is. Now, ideally, with a completely flat field of view, all of these fake stars would be exactly the same shape. The stretching around the edges is due to lensing. So what I'm going to try to do is let APT do an autofocus for me. So this is now the camera connected only to the nosing and to the visual back. And with the star in the center in perfect focus, as per the focus aid, I can really see the comas around the stars around the edges. Now let's see what difference switching in the T-adapter is going to make. I'm just going to slide my T-adapter right on top of the nosing and fit that back into the visual back. This time I'm running the focus aid using the T-adapter. And let's see whether or not the comas at the edges get better or worse. This result really surprised me. It went against the way that I thought this would logically work. It turns out that using a T-adapter without a focal reducer actually made the focus worse. The lensing around the edges is much more significant than it was when the camera was connected to the telescope using the nosing only. Alright, we're going to try the same thing again, and this time with the focal reducer. Now the focal reducer is connected only to the T-adapter and no other expander rings, which means my back focus should be too short. Let's see what happens. Alright, so the first thing that's very apparent as soon as I put on the focal reducer is how much wider the field of view is, which is very cool and what we're expecting. Now the second thing, from this test, my back focus was about 35 millimeters too short. And what we can see is that there is distortion around the edges. Now let's see what happens with the proper back focus of 105 millimeters. Now, while I was at this, I took the opportunity to tweak my collimation, since I found that this is actually a really easy way to collimate your scope, since you have a good distribution of quote-unquote stars across your field of view. So according to documentation, the proper back focus, once again, is 105 millimeters, and that is without a filter. A filter would change that. So, as per the internet, here is 6.5 millimeters inside the camera, 11 millimeters for the spacer. This is 16.5 millimeters for this filter tray without a filter. And then on top of that, let me grab the 21 millimeter spacer. Now, to use it, I'm going to need this adapter. Let's grab this. Okay, put that onto here. And finally, the T adapter. So that is 50 millimeters plus 21, that makes 71 millimeters, plus 16.5, plus 11, plus 6.5. So that totals up to 105 millimeters. Okay, so I've gone through a few more rounds of testing, and here's what I found. First of all, my collimation was good, but it wasn't perfect. So I took a bit more time, and I perfected it as much as I could. Now the stars along the edges all look the same, at least to me. Now the other thing that I found is that even with the focal reducer / field flattener, the stars around the edges are still stretched. Now I'm not sure if this is because 105 millimeters is not the appropriate distance, or is it because this is the best that I can expect from this setup. To find out, I'm going to add another 30 millimeters to the back focus to really stretch it out. All right, so with an additional 30 millimeters of back focus, I'm not seeing that classic shape that we would expect from the diagrams. Now the stars are more bloated around the edges, and maybe that constitutes that kind of stretching, but it's not as apparent as I would have expected. And it's certainly not as pronounced as what I would have thought with an additional 30 millimeters of back focus. So that is a somewhat unusual result. I ended up running a few more tests. I added in a filter and set my back focus to 106 millimeters, which should be the proper back focus for this setup with a filter. And then I tested the back focus by adding and removing 1 or 2 millimeters at a time. From all of my testing, setting the back focus to 106 millimeters with the filter gave me the best results, just as setting my back focus to 105 millimeters gave me the best results without the filter. With these results, I waited for the next clear night in order to test my settings. It's been a few days since I tested my back focus inside. The weather has been absolutely awful. A lot of wind, a lot of clouds. Tonight was supposed to be completely cloudy and windy. The clouds parted for a short while. They're rolling in right now. It's too windy for me to set up guiding because my scope would be all over the place. So I'm running unguided with very short exposures. My polar alignment seems to be pretty good, so I'm hoping there's not too much drift on the short exposures capturing stars. I'm capturing the same cluster, so 884 and I believe 882 that are side to side. I'll have to double check that. From what I'm seeing so far, it's hard to tell on the screen. I'm going to have to analyze the results once I've finished the capture, but I have a plan that's going, that's capturing 5-second, 10-second, and 15-second intervals, or 5-second, 10-second, 15-second exposures at various gains. And I'm really not concerned here about taking a good picture. I just want to see the stars and what shape they are. So, yeah, wish me luck. I managed to get a number of frames on NGC 884. Not as many as the first night, but enough to be able to do a comparison. I took my first image and the image from that last night, and I inverted them. And I was happy to see that after all of the adjustments, the stars in my final image were much rounder across a wider field of view. I'm still noticing a little bit of a collimation issue in one corner. So what have we found? Well, first of all, the documentation and the internet were correct. I found the best results when setting my back focus without a filter to 105 millimeters and with a filter to 106 millimeters. And this is when using the ASI294MC Pro with the Celestron 6SE Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope. I'm adding this voiceover in order to stress just how much of a difference 1 millimeter can make. The first image was taken at 105 millimeters using a UV IR cut filter. Because I was using a filter, I needed to add 1 more millimeter to my back focus. In the second image, the stars are bloated due to bad seeing, but they are much more round. In fact, the bloating accentuates the fact that the stars are much rounder compared to the first image. I also found that there is lensing regardless of what I do, and this may very well be common to this class of telescope. Now, I started out hoping to be able to get rid of the lensing altogether, but I was happy to find the sweet spot. Now, one thing that surprised me was that the lensing distortions that I was seeing, whether my back focus was too close or too far away, did not match the images that I saw on OPT's website, meaning I wasn't seeing that radial pattern when I was too close and the elongated stretch around the edges when I was too far away. In fact, the distortions, whether I was too close or too far away in back focus, were pretty much the same. Now, I did find that when the back focus was poorly set, either too close or too far away, that the lensing distortions would be much more noticeable across a wider proportion of the field of view. So it definitely pays to set the proper back focus distance. One other thing did surprise me though, and that is that the best focus for the camera without a focal reducer is connecting the camera using the nosing to the visual back directly, which leaves no space for any kind of filters. Finally, bloated stars due to bad seeing or bad focus exacerbate the lensing. So the bigger your stars appear, the more distortion you're going to see. So are these findings going to keep me away from astrophotography? Not by a long shot. I think I'll continue to do what most of us do already, which is crop our images. Anyway, I know I've learned a few things. Thanks for watching, and clear skies.